House Party by Eric Walters. Chapter 9. I wandered from room to room. I was trying to get a count of how many people were in the house. There had to be close to 100 kids. Thank goodness nobody else was going to get inside. Mike and Mo were working the door like a couple of bouncers, letting people out but not letting anybody else in. There were, of course, some people that I knew and some that went to our school, but most of them were complete strangers. Even worse, some of them were a lot older than me. They were adults, or at least no longer in high school. I sidled around the dance floor. It was crowded, and the music was so loud that I could hardly hear myself think. Every seat in the living room was taken, and people were standing around and talking and laughing. They did look like they were having a good time. I wish I could have been laughing or dancing or talking instead of worrying and cleaning, hoping that it would all end without anything more happening. There were drinks everywhere, bottles of beer and wine coolers, glasses filled with punch or whatever. Along with them were plates, our good plates, lying here and there with crusts of pizza. Somebody had taken down the plates when the pizza arrived. I kept gathering up the plates and putting them safely in the laundry room sink, as well as picking up the empty bottles and cups. I was quickly becoming the cleaning staff at my own party. The most bizarre thought kept rolling around in my head. Despite it all, it really did look like a good party. There was going to be a lot of cleaning to do. I hope my parents wouldn't find out about it, but it all might just work out. Jen and I were throwing a grade A, top of the line party. There was the sound of squealing tires as I glanced out the front window. I was stunned by what I saw. I knew people were outside, but I had no idea how many. There had to be 200 kids on our front lawn and on the street. Everywhere I looked, I saw people. Unable to believe the scene, they were standing in groups, sitting on the curb. There seemed to be as many cars as there were people. It was like a parking lot with cars clogging the entire street. Another car tore away, leaving a patch of rubber, and the crowd cheered its approval. I felt like cheering too. At least one more car and one more person leaving. Lots of people out there held bottles of beer or plastic cups, the cups we had put out. Obviously, some of these kids, many of them, had been inside the house at one time. Thank goodness for Mike and Mo. They were keeping the crowd under control. If all those people had just tried to come in the house, it would have imploded and collapsed under the crush. I'd been so busy and worried about what was happening inside, I hadn't thought about looking outside. What were the neighbors thinking? They couldn't miss this. They had to be standing in their houses looking out their windows. This wasn't good. My parents really didn't know any of the neighbors, but they did talk to them sometimes. Somebody was bound to mention this to them, unless I mentioned it first. I could tell them there was some sort of big gathering on the street, some sort of party, but I didn't know where it had been held. It had to be at one of the neighbors' houses. Sometimes the best defense was a good offense. Regardless, I couldn't hope to control what was happening out there. At least what was happening out At least it was happening out there instead of in here. As I watched, a fight broke out between two guys. They started pushing and shoving. A punch was thrown at the crowd, surged forward, surrounding and then separating them. Then a second fight broke out, and somebody smashed a bottle against the sidewalk. A car alarm went on. The car's honking and its lights flashing. The whole thing was like a scene from a movie. I was glad to be inside. It's getting crazy out there, Jen said. Totally. But there's nothing we can do about it, is there? Jen shook her head. Those people out there aren't at the party. We have no responsibility for them. But they wouldn't be out there if it wasn't for us having a party in here. In is the key word. What happens out there has nothing to do with us. I thought she was wrong, but I really wanted to believe her. I guess you're right. Let's just keep taking care of things inside, she said. Of course. Why aren't you on the stairs? Don't worry. I asked a couple of guys to watch the stairs. They're taking care of it. Nobody's going upstairs, and more people are leaving all the time. Look. Mike had the front door open and was letting out a couple people. Two or more people and down, and another 100 to go. It was all starting to look like it might just work. Suddenly, four guys pushed themselves in the door. Mike tried to stop them, but they were bigger and outnumbered him and Mo. Behind them came two girls and another guy. Jen and I rushed to the door just in time to get help. Mo slammed the door shut to stop the flood. Somebody started pounding at the door, and there was a yelling and a screaming from the people who'd been kept out. They were angry, but I didn't care. They were outside and they weren't coming in no matter how hard they pounded. That is, they weren't coming in until we tried to let somebody out. What would happen then? We just had to hope that those people outside would get tired and go away before that happened. There was a tremendous smash, and people started to scream. It was coming from upstairs in the living room. I rushed up the stairs and stopped, stunned, unable to believe the scene. The entire floor was covered with broken glass. The big front picture window had been smashed. There was a gigantic hole in the window, and there was a brick lying in the middle of the floor. A girl was holding onto her arm, which was bleeding badly. It looked like she'd been cut by flying glass. She was crying, and two other girls were holding on to her, trying to comfort her, but they weren't stopping the blood from dripping down on the carpet. Then a second brick smashed through the window, taking out the part of the remaining glass, sending shards showering into the room. People screamed and yelled and shoved as they scrambled out of the way, bumping into each other, dropping their drinks, knocking over chairs. I pressed against the wall as they rushed past the door. Mike saw them coming and swung open the door. The mass of people tried to rush out. At the same time, others saw an opportunity and tried to run in. There was a crash of bodies, people pushing and shoving and fighting to get past each other. Kids were jostled and trampled, and bodies bounced against the wall and each other. But finally, the force of people trying to get overpowered by the kids literally fell out through the door. There was a loud smash, and the music just stopped. I turned in time just to see my father's stereo fly through the air and out the picture window, picking one of the few pieces of glass still clinging to the frame. There was more screaming and yelling, and then there was a tremendous smash of broken glass coming from the kitchen. More people ran out of the kitchen as I tried to force my way upstream and find out what happened. I barged through and saw the punch bowl was in a million pieces. The reddish fruit punch had stained the floor. My mother's punch bowl, her antique family heirloom, was gone. How could I explain what happened? I couldn't explain that or the broken windows. I felt like crying. I just wanted to slump to the punch stained floor, roll into a ball, and cry. Instead, I started to yell. Everybody, get out! Get out of my house! I screamed at the top of my lungs. There were people in the kitchen, stopped laughing, and looked at me as if I was crazy. Get out of my house! I screamed again. I don't even know you! Get out! They were stunned. Nobody moved. I reached over and slapped the drink out of the girl's hand. The plastic cup bounced against the wall and splattered onto the floor, and she jumped backwards. Get out of my house! I screamed. Everybody unfroze. Some of the people put down their drinks, and others just started moving out of the kitchen. Out of the kitchen was good. Now I wanted them out of my house. I followed them into the living room and was met by a mass of people, and a sudden burst of courage seemed to deflate. How could I ever get this many people to leave? Just then, I heard the sirens.